What's up, fight fans? This is Kurt Deville with Counterpunch Boxing News, and I have some new news concerning Luis King Kong Ortiz and Joe the Juggernaut Joyce. Get this. Joe Joyce's manager open to Luis Ortiz fight. Wow. Sam Jones said that he'd be open to a fight between the Juggernaut and the former two-time heavyweight world challenger Luis Ortiz. Whether Joyce fights with the talented 42-year-old Cuban will be up to his promoter Frank Warren and manager Sam Jones. Ortiz might be too good for Joyce. Look at it this way. If Ortiz beats Joyce, he'll lose his WBA mandatory spot, and he won't get a world title shot against Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, or whoever holds the belt. Will Jones and Warren give Joe Joyce the green light for the 6'4 Ortiz, or will they deem him too risky? Joyce has been matched with many different fighters, but none of them in the class of Ortiz. Up to now, Joyce has pretty much been matched against exclusively older fighters, whether that's a more coincidence by design or unknown. All you can say for sure is Joyce's promoters have matched him against many older fighters that were well past their prime. It's certainly a great way of matching a flawed fighter if you have doubts about how they would do if they pitted against a younger heavyweight like Filip Hrgovic or Frank Sanchez. Now, they take a look at the fighters that he's been in the ring with. Carlos Takam, 40, as you guys can see. Alexander Ustinov, 44. Bermain Stavern, 42. Brian Jennings, 36. Joe Hanks, 38. Ian Lewison, 39. Lenroy Thomas, 36. And, of course, Daniel Dubois is the young guy, which gave him, I think, the most increase. Okay, so Joe Joyce, okay, is a fighter that people have to look at like this. He has to, at some point, fight someone to the magnitude of Ortiz. All right. But I think at the end of the day, like Sam Jones, he said he'd be open to a fight. He didn't say it was a negotiation. He didn't say that Frank Warren was open to it, okay? One's the manager, the other one's the promoter, okay? So between the manager and promoter, because the manager might mention, we can fathom or that idea or fancy that idea, doesn't mean that's going to happen, okay? Because regardless of what Sam Jones says, we know what Abel Sanchez said, okay, a few years ago, when talking about putting in Joe Joyce with Luis Ortiz. When Joe Joyce, I think he called out Luis Ortiz or mentioned Luis Ortiz. And of course, you remember those guys had a preliminary face-off together. And I think that was a fight that was what's going to be built for Luis Ortiz to come up on the back up in the rankings, but it never happened because Abel Sanchez was like, no, that's not going to happen. That guy has too much experience. And I mean, that guy I'm talking about, Luis Ortiz, from my fighter Joe Joyce, which of course was the trainer of Joe Joyce at the time. Now, the other elephant in the room is, what does Joe Joyce think about that fight? Okay, these are just Sam Jones's opinions about that, thoughts rather, about fighting Ortiz. One thing's for sure. Like him, love him, hate him, or despise him, Deontay Wilder is the guy that has credit for being the only guy that certain fighters seem to duck, i.e. Andy Ruiz on Joe Joyce's team, those type of guys. Now, will Joe Joyce want to put himself on Front Street to fight an older Ortiz? Well, probably not, but given the fact that these guys that he's fought 3 40-something-year-olds, okay, and Luis Ortiz is no exception. I think if he could do that, that would be a huge win from him. I think that would send Luis Ortiz on out of the way because you know how that goes. 3 strikes and you're out. Look at Dominic Brazil. Okay. I don't think that they would put that in there. I would love to see Brazil versus Joe Joyce. That would be hot because, you got two slow, big fighters just throwing heavy thunder at each other. That would be great, mental note, side note. But I don't think as Joe Joyce, I don't think that would be the smartest thing for him. So I think, honestly, this is just cap because everyone always talks about fighting Ortiz but never gets that opportunity. Now, that could be by design by the team of Luis Ortiz for certain situations due to other fighters, because some fighters are meant to be in the game to make other fighters look good, i.e. Wilder. Okay, that's why a lot of people were not allowed to fight Ortiz, because Ortiz was that guy that further made Deontay Wilder look good. Okay, but at the end of the day, guys like Joe Joyce and other fighters need to fight Luis Ortiz. Ortiz needs a premier fight, whether it's Andy Ruiz or whatever, or maybe, again, they're keeping him on ice over there just for another fight when he does look old. And in the name, only one person has beat him. Someone else of that statue has to come and join Deontay Wilder. Okay, so I think that people need to fight him. However, will that be Joe Joyce? I seriously doubt it, okay? Because it's one of these things where you have a guy that's very aggressive, a Cuban that's very talented, that's very experienced, taking on someone like Joe Joyce. But mind you, Joe Joyce himself is 35. Okay, so he doesn't really have time to mess around. So if he is going to take that opinion or listen to the advice of Sam Jones, I do think that he should do it now versus a year from now and all this, because people will know the waiting game was in full effect. That was the overall strategy. Wait Ortiz out after he's already been famous for jokes and memes that Ortiz was back fighting Jack Johnson and sparring with Joe Frazier and George Foreman, to now he's even older when you fight him. I think that waiting game stuff is really cowardice. And I think if you're going to fight someone, fight them at their best. But anyway, you guys tell me what you think of Sam Jones saying that he's open to his fighter, Joe Joyce, taking on Luis King Kong Ortiz. Of course, please subscribe. And you guys been Counterpunch. Peace.